Turkesterone, or more specifically, Greg Doucette's Turkbuilder. This is easily the most debated supplement online over the last couple of years. And it's because you got people like Greg out there saying,
felt like I was on test suspension. Have you ever taken test suspension?
no. And you have articles telling us that it puts on more weight than the oral anabolic steroid Dianabol. And then you've got Andrew Huberman out there who, for some strange reason, decides to tell people that this stuff acts like Deca. It doesn't. And the lack of studies really do seem to be concerning people. But what if I were to tell you that there were actual studies? Statistically significant studies that are conclusive and do in fact prove its effectiveness. My name is Travis Dillard. Some people around here call me the Prohormone professor. And today I'm here to answer one question. The question that we've all had that for some reason nobody can answer. Does turkesterone actually work? Does it really build muscle at all? The benefits, the side effects, its sketchy history, how to cycle it, the proper dosing, and in the name of truth, beyond the fact that when Turkbuilder first came out, it was completely bogus, garbage, bunk. Well, Greg has lied to us. And I'm just here to set the record straight because quite honestly, somebody's got to. So please don't shoot the messenger. My dudes, Greg, we ready? This is Turkesterone, Turkbuilder. Let's do it.
You are now in the presence of a
30 pages of cuts, fly-ins, and edits for this video. Special shout out to my editor, Stella Finn. Keep grinding, girl. This is the sordid history of turkesterone. Derived from the plant Ajuca turkestanica, turkesterone's history would go back centuries. Particularly found in Central Asia, used as traditional medicine to treat vitality, improve recovery, and just overall well-being, especially during an illness or trying to recover from an injury. But we wouldn't see it first documented officially until 1975, when the leading Soviet sports researcher at the time, M.N. Sirov, would first begin to study the plant's non-hormonal anabolic effects on animals. But of course, we've got to add a little more mystique to this whole turkesterone narrative because it's not confusing enough. Of course, the Russians are not going to reveal their findings. That would be too easy. Something about being secretive and trying to get ahead or something. And though we didn't have access to the mass distribution of information, aka social media back then, this would mark a very important milestone in the bodybuilding world. This would be the first attempt to find an anabolic that's natural, outside of the HPTA axis, which would ultimately improve endurance, recovery, and help with fatigue, particularly for Russians with the military personnel, without all the side effects and all the BS that comes with anabolic steroids. And even though we don't have access to the same information we have today, and the Russians did try to hide it, word would eventually get out that the Russians were working on this plant, some kind of material that would boost performance, enough so that people would be interested. It would spread like wildfire. The hype was real around the world. But unfortunately, in the 19th centuries, researchers shifted their focus over to the real anabolic steroids. Guess it just wasn't sexy enough. There would be, however, over the next 40 years, rat studies, as well as human cell studies or in vitro. But it wouldn't be until 2019 when the organization backed by WADA, the Archives of Toxicology, would publish the first human study specifically looking at the effect of turkesterone on muscle building. The results? Well, for my nerds out there, it had a p-value of 0.01, showing statistical significance. What did we measure? Muscle gain, as I mentioned. What do we conclude? A 7% increase on average of muscle gain in a 10-week period, using a sample size of 42 males. Even though that sample size is small, it was still enough correlation to deem it statistically significant and therefore conclusive. WADA financially backed this, and the final recommendation of the researchers were to add this to the S1 class of anabolic agents, which I believe that was WADA's ultimate intention. But as of today, as of this video, it is not a banned substance by WADA. And then, in May of 2024, a study would be released that would ultimately shake up the fitness community as we know it. We all want turkesterone to work. We've got a confirmation bias, of course we do, but we would really like it to work. It's a natural thing that outside the HPTA axis could be a lot of fun and maybe a great supporting ingredient. But all this study would do is just disprove Andrew Huberman's statement.
So this plant compound is equivalent to Deca?
Essentially.
But did it really? Direct original research took 31 males and gave them turkesterone for 4 weeks and found no effect on body fat percentage or lean body mass. But this is a big but. I don't know why people are not looking in this. It makes me angry. The p-value is 0.68, implying that there's a weak correlation P-value, I know it's been a long time since we've been in statistics class, but p-value, the lower it is, the more correlated it is. Remember the 2019 study that was a 0.01? This is a 0.68. What that means is it hasn't reached statistical significance. So we can say that this pill does absolutely nothing, but this study, it doesn't matter what it says. It's not telling us anything because it's not statistically significant. So while this study doesn't show whether this is DECA or not, let's just get that out of the way. This is not DECA. Can we stop saying that? The study, though, it doesn't prove a dang thing. Taken one level deeper, and I think you're really going to like this. When we look at turkesterone, how studied is it actually? When we compare it to a prohormone, a SARM, or a peptide, how does it stack up? Well, at the time of this video, both turkesterone and just acetosteroids in general and prohormones have made it to phase 0, or the exploratory human studies phase. SARMs have made it the furthest it could possibly go to phase 3, as it was not approved for medical use. Do not pass go, do not collect $200. And with a medical seal of approval, peptides, due to its insane medicinal benefits, they've made their way to the actual final phase, phase 4, or the post-marketing surveillance phase, aka the practice of watching the safety of a drug when it first hits the market. Oh, and I say acetosteroid, it's actually pronounced ectosteroid. Just wanted to put that out there. Pretty interesting stuff, right? I mean, I think so. And we're just getting started. Which is why now we're going to talk about turkesterone, what it actually is, and how it works. In October of 2021, Greg would release his version of turkesterone, calling it Turkbuilder. And I don't know exactly when this happened, but I'm assuming it was shortly thereafter he would realize that
Myself and Derek and Chris Bumstead, all our companies got turkesterone from the same exact supplier.
from China, which Greg, you knew about this. Yet you still sold it as turkesterone, knowing that it wasn't turkesterone. And then when asked about it, you're like, no. China, that wasn't, I thought it was turkesterone, but turns out it's an acetosteroid. Yes, you, more plates, more dates, Derek, and whoever else. I don't even know. It doesn't matter. The point is that you knew. Yet here you are. And then when people asked you about it, you said that it was an acetosteroid, not turkesterone. Meanwhile, turkesterone is an acetosteroid. If this is the same product relabeled that you tried to sell us at the beginning and we found out was bunk, that ain't gonna look too good. And now that you are equally as confused as I am, Jesus, turns out it is, in fact, turkesterone, that is, an acetosteroid from a family of 50 known acetosteroids geographically found in
Uzbekistan. Uzbekistan.
which Greg now sources from. So now we've got some real ingredients. Let's take a look at them. Each capsule is going to have 15 milligrams of turkesterone, which Greg points out is $1,120 for one single gram. And he didn't have to share this with us, but he did. At $1,120 for 1 gram, the math ain't mathin', because 1,000 milligrams is 1 gram, and at 15 milligrams per pill, that would equate to $16.70 per pill. If you're going to multiply that by 40, which you have to because each bottle contains 40 pills, you're looking at about $670 per bottle. And when you're selling it at $70, either you're eating that cost, which you're not, you're lying to us, which I don't think you are, or you're just not telling us the full truth. Either way, if you're going to be transparent, be transparent. Say hi to Soph. And worse, and I'm really kind of speculating now, but that cost I just mentioned doesn't even include the other 2 main ingredients, the 15 milligrams of 10-hydroxyacetylene and the 6 milligrams of other minor acetosteroids. And these 3 ingredients, the 2 I just mentioned, as well as turkesterone, are all considered acetosteroids, as I mentioned, or non-hormonal plant steroids, much like laxoginin in the prohormone world that represents a supporting ingredient to other prohormones, and this one might be a supporting ingredient too. But an acetosteroid by itself is part of the molting process in insects, or the shedding of an exoskeleton, allowing it to move from a larva to an adult. And in plants, it can be seen on the stems, the leaves, and the roots, so that when an insect lands on it and eats some of it, ingests it, it'll have an upset stomach and might even lead to weight loss. And in worst case scenarios, if they've never been exposed to it before, they might even die. In humans, this is a different anabolic experience than we've covered before. We've covered anything like this, which is where a lot of the confusion comes from. So let's clear it up. So rather than working like a prohormone, a SARM, or a steroid, which operates in the HPTA axis, messing with our testosterone, estrogen, and DHT, as our estrogen goes up, we get water retention, gyno, and bloat. As our DHT goes up, it can mess with our hair. It's going to operate entirely in a different pathway, turkesterone. As to what pathway? Well, we don't know yet, because the science isn't quite there. Anybody saying otherwise, they don't know either. For instance, if we were to go back and look at that 2019 study, they claim that it works in the beta receptor pathway. This is just one of the small handful of mechanistic theories out there. And if we want to know the most widely accepted theory, the one that we hear on pretty much every video, Greg's talking about all the time, well, is that it upregulates the mTOR pathway, which is the area responsible for protein synthesis, increasing it, which is obviously crucial for gaining muscle. Greg, we need a mechanistic study. You've got the resources. You've got the most to gain. It would make us really happy. Turkesterone's half-life is unknown, but the half-life of a general acetosteroid is anywhere between a couple hours to a full day. So it's in and out of your system pretty quick. I want to make one thing super clear here. Greg only got in the trouble that he did and got the pushback that he did because of the efficacy of his turkesterone, which obviously when we buy a product, we want to actually get what it is that we buy. And while he did purchase it or source it from China, so did Chris Bumstead and More Plates, More Dates Derek, there was really no way for him to know the difference between what I think is just a general acetosteroid, which I think he's calling Turkbuilder now, versus turkesterone, because the science is limited. There's no way to know. My point is that he's fixed that issue. And if you don't believe it, that's fine. I'm not saying I do, but let's trust it just for the sake of this conversation. And if you don't trust him, stop watching this video. Don't watch any of his videos. Move on with your life. But if you are thinking about it, the next step or the next objection is going to be the lack of studies. And while that may be true, there is an anecdotal study which showed a 7% increase in muscle mass over a 10-week period, which we went over, but that can't be replicated. And the other one, which was the 2023 one, which has got all the buzz saying that it's not DECA, didn't prove jack anything because it wasn't statistically significant, and the p-value was freaking 0.68. I mean, we can't do anything with that. When did we need a study to tell us whether we can take a product or not? We wouldn't touch half the prohormones, SARMs, peptides, really half of these supplements out there. We rely on bro science, and it can be effective. And in this case is where it exists, which is why we have to use it in order to answer the question, what are the benefits of turkesterone? Funny enough, that same 2019 study that we were just talking about, the one that increases muscle mass by 7% over a 10-week period. I had to take a deep breath there. When we look at Greg's videos, sure, I mean, there's quite a few comments that are negative. It's bunk, throw it away, save your money, yada, yada, yada. But there are a few that are positive that actually fall right in line with that 2019 study and the results that it showed. Here's two of them. 7 pounds in a month and a half, better workouts. I noticed significant changes, especially in my strength. Creatine without the water retention. Turkesterone, or acetosteroids just in general, do have stimulatory properties because of its increasing GABA, thus increasing dopamine and norepinephrine. So you might experience an increase in motivation, drive, and just have more energy. Now, Greg goes 100% too hard all the time, harder than last time and the time before that on energy.
And what did I notice? Not tired. It's funny. It's 3 a.m. and I'm still awake. Did you find it hard to sleep? Yes.
My thing is that I don't really want to tangle with anything that could potentially get in the way of my sleep, because that excess energy can flow into anxiety as you can't fall asleep. At least it does for me. I'll be the first to admit it. We're all human. This could potentially add more fuel to the fire. Now, this is a side effect that I experience. You may experience, you may not. However, you will more than likely experience one of these side effects. So let's talk about them. But first, I just want to let you know that I really am not here to sell you on anything. I mean, obviously, I'm being very unbiased about this whole turkesterone, Turkbuilder thing. I'm not even here to sell you on the idea of turkesterone. What I am here to sell you is information and education. And part of that is knowing that there are actually legitimate products out there selling turkesterone sourced from Uzbekistan. Jesus. Turkesterone 650, for instance, by High Tech Pharmaceuticals, has 65 milligrams of turkesterone, which is 4 times that of Turkbuilder, and it's cheaper. So if you're interested, no obligation at all. But Travis D, TotalNutritionHouston.com, 10% off, link description. Let's get back to the side effects. Some users have reported mild digestive and dizziness, issues like nausea, stomach discomfort, diarrhea, which can be overcome by taking it with food, and not exceeding 2,000 milligrams a day. Yeah, I think you're pretty much good to go there with Turkbuilder. 15 milligrams times 2 is 30 milligrams. That's 2 pills a day. Yeah, you should be in the clear. And I can't believe I have to even say this, but if you're allergic to anything in Turkbuilder, that's the acetosteroids or any ingredient in there, do not take this or stop taking it, or you're going to have a bad time. If you're overstimulated, aka you've been pushing it too hard recently, you're in that overreaching phase, slow down first of all, or you are overly sensitive to stimulants. Well, in general, acetosteroids, you're going to want to watch out for anxiety, that uneasy feeling, heart palpitations potentially, definitely an increase in heart rate, which could thus constrict your blood vessels, then increase your blood pressure, and even cause insomnia. And headaches, which could be caused by dehydration or that high blood pressure we were just talking about when you're overly stimulated. And though not conclusive, some have indicated a decrease in our blood sugar levels, which would make us hungry. The confusing part, though, is that, well, Greg contradicts this.
I have to force myself to eat. I've never felt this before. I don't understand what's happening.
So, Greg, let me get this straight real quick. You've got insomnia, you're not hungry, you've got manic energy, and you have a type A personality. To me, Greg, this sounds an awful lot like energy fueled by anxiety. It's not just that clean source you keep talking about. But if you are worried about sleep issues or anxious thoughts, this is all going to be dependent upon your dosing and your timing. So let's talk about that and the cycle length. Now, keep in mind that the clinical dose of turkesterone within the two studies we mentioned today, that's 2019, 2024, is in fact 500 milligrams per day. And keep in mind that Turkbuilder contains 300 milligrams of just general acetosteroids. However, 50 milligrams of that 300 milligrams is turkesterone. The remaining 285 milligrams is just general acetosteroids. And while general acetosteroids can still lead to higher energy production, it's just not going to be as powerful as turkesterone. We don't know the science at all. Well, we know some of it. We don't know it conclusively, but what we do know is that turkesterone is one of the most powerful acetosteroids. And acetosteroids just in general can lead to some excitatory stimulus on your central nervous system, which can lead to, well, things that we've already discussed, like insomnia. There's not a single supplement on this planet, or really any planet or any universe, that is worth taking if it gets in the way of your sleep. Because remember that sleep is the most anabolic thing that we can do. Dosage-wise, 40 pills in a bottle. Unfortunately, we can't stick with the clinical dosing of 500 milligrams, though, because it's not exactly offered by Turkbuilder. So, Greg, we're going to have to rely on you here. You moved from 3 pills to 2 pills, as we saw, which that seemed to be the sweet spot for you. And then you also took everything in the morning to make sure that you didn't get that insomnia. So we're going to stick with that. Now, in terms of the long-term effects of turkesterone and Turkbuilder, well, we don't know. So we're going to have to cycle this. I recommend 12 weeks and then a couple weeks off. It's not super important that you stick to this exactly because it's not going to affect our HPTA axis, but just be smart with this. And in terms of the number of bottles you will need for a 12-week cycle, that's going to be 5 bottles, which that's going to be quite costly. So let's talk about 8 weeks. Well, that's going to be 3 bottles. So after all this, would I personally take it? Does it have benefits? Yeah. Is it safe? Yes. But don't get it twisted. It ain't this.
I took 3 capsules the first day. I said, what is going on? Felt like I was on test suspension. Have you ever taken test suspension? Probably not. Well, what it does, it makes you feel more aggressive.
A non-hormonal plant steroid feels the same way as the fastest acting testosterone? Greg, I don't think so. Does it still put on muscle? Well, the 2019 study at least proved that it's possible. Fortunately, we can't replicate that, which should have us semi-cautious about this. It can still lead to a boost, but is it worth the take on its own? Well, that all depends on where you are in your anabolic journey. If you're new to this stuff, this could be a great way to get your feet wet because it's not messing with your HPTA axis, so you're not going to have to play the hormone game, which for the record is a lot of fun and worth it in the long run, but there's a steep learning curve to it. But if you do have experience, unless it's a supporting ingredient to a larger bodybuilding stack, personally, it's going to be a no for me, dog. God, it's so embarrassing. I'm still quoting American Idol. But Greg, I've got some unsolicited business advice for you. Assuming that we are sourcing this correctly, and we appreciate that you've proven that to us, the next time that you go and you sell a compound strictly based on bro science to then increase the price by $10 and offer a money-back guarantee at the first sign of resistance, you may want to first educate your audience in an unbiased way. Otherwise, expect more refunds than last time. But who the heck am I to even say such a thing? I mean, we've got like a couple thousand subscribers over here in this weird dark corner of the internet, and I don't know jack of anything. But what I do know, well, there's been a rumor going around, swirling around the fitness industry, that you might be interested in conducting your own turkesterone mechanistic study because there hasn't been one yet. And that $300,000 that you're about to spend, we deeply appreciate. But what this does tell us genuinely is that you are actually interested in doing this right. I got to be honest with you. I used to watch a lot of your videos and they taught me a lot. This was like 7-8 years ago. It's a foundation to the knowledge that I get to share now with the world. And I think that's pretty dang cool. Today, I don't necessarily agree with your channel. It's more of a soap opera than it is actually explaining bodybuilding. But it doesn't matter what I think or even what you think. about Greg or any of his products. Because the fact of the matter is he's been in or around the industry since he was 13 years old. And that takes courage, heart, and you just got to respect it. I'll see you next week, my dudes. Until then, stay safe and stay swole, my brothers.